Hi, welcome back to Interesting and Sexy, a podcast dedicated to spreading the awareness and visibility of intersex people, as well as discussing issues/experiences about queer life, being different, and all other things interesting and sexy. Today, we've got an awesome guest. She'll be joining us from America, and she has a very similar story to mine. She went big on TikTok sharing her experience about being intersex, and I'm really excited to get into it. If you are really liking these videos and podcasts, I would really appreciate it if you could please subscribe and share it around, because it would really help me in being able to make more of these videos and make them bigger and better. And I would really, really appreciate it. So if you could please subscribe, that would be awesome. And share it around to someone and spread the interesting and sexy love. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into the podcast now and introduce you to our guest, Sydney. Well, welcome, Sydney. Thank you very much for coming on. It's great to have you here today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. So do you want to just go in and tell us who you are, who is Sydney, what are you about, and how do you identify?
All right. Well, I'm 23 years old. I live in Pocatello, Idaho. I'm a student. I study finance and marketing. And my job right now is to be a TikToker. I got started about a year ago by sharing my stories about being an intersex person. I identify as an intersex person, but I tend to appear like very female to people, and I'm comfortable with any pronouns, but I feel like I've kind of lived a very feminine existence, and that definitely contributes to my identity.
Nice. Do you want to talk about your variation? You don't have to if you don't want to, and a little bit about how it works. Yeah, I know, because I have a similar experience to you that I appear very, very feminine. I've lived basically my whole life being treated as a female, living as a regular girl. And then this intersex variation is a bit hidden, but we have different variations. So it's interesting to just discuss how these different variations work.
Yeah, well, I also identify with your story, and we share that experience where you grow up as a woman, you're treated as a woman, and when you do find out that you're intersex, it's not treated the same, because you don't look like intersex necessarily. That's how people have treated me as well. You look like a woman, you're just a flawed woman, basically. It was discovered when I was 17. I discovered actually that I didn't have a vaginal opening because I had something called a microperforate hymen, which is when your hymen, it covers almost the entirety of that opening. There was nothing but a pin-sized hole there. And up until that point, I hadn't menstruated, which I later found out is tied to the fact that I'm also hormonally intersex, meaning I have more androgens, or what are called male hormones, than a typical female does. That was very lucky, because if I had menstruated without an opening, it could have caused me to really just die, to have some horrible infection. We've all heard of toxic shock syndrome, and the variety of infections that can be caused by having a buildup of fluid are really very scary. So I'm lucky to have had those intersex hormones. And also at 17, I was able to get a hymenectomy. So they created a vaginal opening that is now very typical to any other vaginal opening. No variation is really detectable. My other variation that I've realized also related to having high androgens is clitoromegaly, or having a slightly enlarged clitoris. So those are the ways that my body is sort of biologically different than a woman, I suppose.
And when you said that you were the one that kind of went and discovered this yourself. How was your experience with the doctors and stuff during your process of discovery?
I'm still trying to figure that out, because there are moments in my life when I think that maybe there was some malpractice, but it doesn't feel intentional, because the doctors that I've had either don't know anything about what it means to be intersex, or they don't believe it's like a real thing or it should continue to exist. And it's hard to understand whether that's truly people's choices or if it's sort of an indoctrination that is caused by this very religious and conservative atmosphere that we live in. So when I think I was about 15 or so, when I got placed on a drug called spironolactone, which is used for the treatment of hormonal acne. But what it does is it helps in the production of female hormones. It's also used by trans women to feminize their bodies. And I think that that was the wrong choice for someone who is intersex. I feel as though it's erased and changed my bodies in some irreparable ways. I've tried to stop taking that drug, but had negative side effects. It's something my body relies on now. So in that sense, I think the doctor was doing what they thought was right, but I don't think it was. So that's probably my first example of this sort of conflict of, have I been treated correctly as an intersex person or not? Was it malicious or not? I don't really know.
And in terms of the surgery that you went through, did you feel like well informed, or did you?
Not at all.
Yeah.
They didn't even know what it was called. I'm the one that said, I have a microperforate hymen. They did not believe me. And when they took a look, they tried to like force things inside me, like the speculum or fingers or Q-tips. And that was incredibly painful. And I just don't think that they comprehended what it meant to have like a microperforate hymen. They weren't familiar with the condition. So even though I walked in there with the term and I had studied my own body, they had to sort of experiment to finally validate that information that I arrived with. And then the surgery didn't start out as a hymenectomy because they didn't know if I had actually a vaginal canal. I'm not sure why we didn't do, what is that called when they look at your insides from the outside? I always forget.
Ultrasound?
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know why we didn't do one of those, but they just decided to do what they called an exploratory surgery. And they said that they would create that X incision. What I've learned since is that there are variations of hymenectomies, and that it is in the first place called a hymenectomy, that are used based off of the preference of the patient and sometimes their religious background too. And I didn't know there were any sort of variations. I did know there was another option for treatment, but the doctor wrote that off really quickly. I think that was probably a smart thing, because what I had read about was when you stretch the vaginal opening using dilation, like a series of objects that you insert that stretch it and make it bigger. Yeah. That would have been extremely painful. So I'm glad I didn't end up doing that. Yeah. But it was a lot of confusion, really. And I'm glad that we ended up with what we ended up with, because I think it was a successful surgery, but never was the word intersex ever uttered. They didn't even want to say microperforate hymen.
Yeah. Well, you're really strong. Yeah, it's incredible that you were the one to lead this and you knew your body, and you took enough like initiative within yourself to really be firm in what you believed and how you knew what was going on inside your body. And first of all, I applaud you for being so strong and brilliant. But it's also, I apologize that you really had to go through that. And like, I'm not sure if you felt, so lost and alone and all of that stuff that I know is really common with the intersex experience. And the term intersex, did that come around the same time as finding out about the microperforate hymen? Is that how you say it?
That is how you say it. Yeah. Microperforate hymen. And it absolutely did not come around that time. Yeah. I didn't know what it meant to be intersex until I was about 21, which did I say 23 earlier? I'm 24, I forget. Yeah. But now it's been 3 years since I even heard the term, and maybe only a little over a year that I fully identified with it. The only reason why I figured out that the series of what I've always considered flaws were actually intersex characteristics is because I had a friendship, multiple friendships with trans people who, when I told them my story, they said, well, that sounds like me. We take some of the same medications. I've also had a surgery to have my body align more with like a female body. So when they started to say, it sounds almost like you're trans, and I knew I wasn't, but I saw what they meant. That's when I Googled what it actually means to just have these conditions. What if
Mm-hmm.
your genitals are different? What if your hormones are different? And that's how I found out what the word intersex means. It's just from looking
Mm-hmm.
it up online.
Nice. Yeah. So did the word intersex and then realizing, oh, the condition that I have is an intersex condition, did that impact your perception of gender identity and sexuality and all of that stuff that you had prior to finding out about that word?
Well, I think for the longest time, I've looked at these things as pretty silly, mostly. And I just see things with a lot of humor. And it's
Mm.
not even till now that I consider them more seriously and thoughtfully. But at the time, I just thought, huh, I'm like special in this way. That's cool. Like
Mm.
technically, my body could be this, but I wouldn't really openly identify as an intersex person, mostly because even though I read that and it felt like me, no one ever called me intersex, so it didn't feel like it could be automatically valid. It is nice,
Mm.
though, to see this lack of identification with any sort of gender as very valid as we find out more about how sex is a spectrum. Biological sex is so varied. It was comforting to know now there's such a factual root to gender identity. While I
Mm.
was never closed-minded about it before, it just was comforting to know. If someone ever said, well, you're not agender or you're not non-binary or someone isn't this or that, now I felt like I had science for it.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on having that scientific backing towards this standpoint that the whole man versus woman so different thing is just so much of a social construct more than anything else. And it's quite liberating to have that experience and being able to bring that experience to the conversation. I know I like drawing the intersex card and being like, oh well, guess what.
Mm-hmm. It brings
um
comfort to the people who need it, and it disproves bigotry.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. um and I guess I would. So you said that you at first were kind of just like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that I'm a little bit different in this way. And then as you went on, you were starting to identify with it a little bit more. Were there any, I mean, obviously, I know during your diagnosis, there was challenges and a lot of confusion and stuff like that, including that. And then after you found out the word intersex, were there challenges and how did you overcome those challenges during that time?
Do you mean the challenges in accepting that that I was an intersex person?
I guess just the challenges that came there of maybe accepting it or the challenges of having to explore it because I know even with being intersex you're kind of forced to even explore that notion of gender and all of that kind of stuff. Like regular people usually will not have to be they don't really have to go into that thought pattern of just like diving into their gender. Like a lot of people just don't have to do that, but with intersex people, you kind of do. And then, yeah, it's just like a very unique experience. And I don't know, I guess the question is, were there any sort of challenges navigating that identity?
A good question. And you're right that a lot of people don't end up questioning these things. They don't ever have to. And maybe some people don't even get to. I think that I've had a great opportunity to explore myself and actually think seriously about what gender I feel comfortable with and what parts of my body are fitting into a mold and what aren't. And I think that discovery for me has been primarily positive and thoughtful, introspective, and now in my life I have a lot of people with whom I can actually speak about this subject matter and they understand very clearly. So I think that I've viewed it as a privilege that a lot of people who just automatically are a part of a certain mold will never get. I think sexuality also comes alongside this. There are a lot of people who are compulsory, what is that called, compulsory heteronormativity. Basically you're straight because that's what's comfortable, that's what you were told to do, that's how your brain works now, that's how you were raised. And if I never was finding out that I was an intersex person, I don't think I would have thought so hard about whether I am the person that I am because someone told me I had to be, or because it's really what
Mm,
feels right and is going to work for me.
yeah. Brilliant answer.
Thank you.
So I know that we have this similar experience not just being intersex, but sharing it on TikTok and having quite a big reception to our videos. Do you want to take us back to that moment when you decided to make that first video, or that one that went viral, and what prompted the decision to make this video?
I had started TikTok about a week before I made that video, and it was because I had experienced some mistreatment at school that I felt no one else was understanding. That even the friends and family that I had around me, I was talking and they were listening, but I don't feel like they understood. And so I was feeling tormented by that, and I thought I need people to talk to. And when I made a video about it, the first video I ever posted on this profile, I had blocked all of my friends and family so that I could speak freely. And it got like 100,000 views. And then after that, I thought, wow, these people really support me, and I want to like talk with them more. I just felt the urge to share more and maybe speak on things that other people haven't been able to relate to in the past. I thought if in this instance I felt alone and I found people, maybe I could do that with other experiences in my life. So that's why I decided to share that I was intersex. And I do believe that's like the first time I ever said it in front of people. I can't recall any other instance in my life where I did and like actually said that proudly. It was also the first time I said from start to finish how I discovered I didn't have a vaginal opening, which is one of my most apparent intersex qualities. So to have that be received then by over 7 million people was very surprising to me, but I saw it mostly as a good thing. It was unfortunate that my family saw the video because I didn't really want to talk to them about this subject matter. And I felt scared about people in my life, like knowing what my body was like.
Yeah.
And telling me that I was wrong or not, or thinking I was undesirable. I think that's definitely a fear that I had. But
Yeah.
online, people were primarily supportive until things got a little more big. I feel like after a few million views is when you get more ignorance and more like fighting in your comments about whether or not you're telling the truth, whether or not you're actually intersex. But I still wasn't bothered by it because I felt like that was just a side effect of finding the people that I finally finding the people that I had always wanted.
Yeah.
That was just
Yeah,
yeah.
that's beautiful. So you found that through sharing your experience, you were able to spark meaningful conversations and find your community, which is really powerful. And it's really important for intersex people to find a community. Making TikToks is hard because when you want to make something that is super meaningful but is also interesting and easy to consume, because of the attention span and everything that people have nowadays, how do you go about creating your TikToks which are so meaningful and informative but keeping them concise and easy to understand?
You're right that it's a hard thing to do. I think that I'm lucky in that people wanted to listen to me, and I'm not sure where that comes from, except I would like to believe that people can sense when you're being earnest and when you're being honest. And I just think that there were enough people that wanted to listen even before I was very skillful at making TikToks. When they were a little too long or a little too awkward, or I made jokes that didn't land, they believed in me really early on. And if you can get a core group of people that enjoy you and care about you, everything else follows. People will just see likes and they'll stop and listen to a video, whether it's really well done or not, because they know that other people cared enough to stop and watch it. So I think that's what lifted my account, and it did so very quickly. And over time, I believe I've become skillful at just knowing, generally speaking, knowing what people want to hear. Whether or not I give them what they want to hear, I have the privilege of being a little more decisive now than I used to be. I make sometimes boring videos because maybe there are 100 people out there that want to hear it, and I don't care if it'll go viral or not. In the beginning, I was just trying my hardest all the time.
You were speaking about the the thing that happens once you get past a certain number where people start arguing and fighting and maybe even saying potentially triggering or hurtful things to you. And you said that you kind of just let them go and not like phase into them too much. Is there any advice you would give to addressing negativity when you're trying to make an impact and you're really trying to do something positive? And any advice in handling that criticism and negativity?
I see a lot of creators get sucked into fighting it, and I've been that way myself, where I feel like I've made videos in sort of a mean-spirited way to try to disprove someone that didn't like understand a condition I shared, or someone who might have insulted the way that my body is, or a medical thing. But that doesn't feel good. And your core following, the people that are always there for you, that you talk to online, they will let you know when those videos don't feel really good. And so I think that talking with friends and family and paying attention to your close internet circle, which is going to be different than your entire following, that's going to let you know whether you're moving in the proper direction. But the rule that I use now is trying to identify ignorance or misinformation versus people who are trying to be vengeful or truly hateful. Because I will delete a hate comment. I will absolutely block someone who's sending insults. But sometimes people are wrong. And I've seen other commenters move in and be like, well, hey, intersex actually means this, or it wasn't polite of you to use this term. And they actually become educated through this process. So also finding that distinction will help you cope.
Yeah, nice. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for people to hear advice from other individuals that have been through it, and it's easy to get sucked into that negative vortex of TikTok. Sometimes it can just be so overwhelming. And I know that also on TikTok, this is a fun fact for anyone listening, you were open about winning the lottery, which is very unique. And I guess coupled with going viral for being intersex, these dual narratives that are kind of like unrelated to each other, how did they shape your perspective of creating your content and the kind of content that you wanted to create?
Made me feel like people saw me as a full person instead of just an intersex person, because most of my following in the beginning was built off of me talking about how my body is weird. And while so much of that was educational and positive, a lot of it is sort of voyeuristic, and that's exhausting.
Absolutely.
So I would try to move away from that and try to maybe tell other stories or talk about something else, some other form of content. And when that didn't work, I felt like, well, I have to go back to making intersex videos. And I still care about making intersex educational videos and doing advocacy. But when it feels compulsory and it feels like people are eating you up, it's not as much fun. So when I was able to maybe gain a little bit more skill in storytelling, and that wasn't the first time I talked about the lottery either, but I had enough eyes on me and the proper skill to gain that attention. And finally, I was like, wow, I'm a person with a lot of different types of stories. And it made me feel more happy to share about being intersex, and like I get to instead of I have to.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I completely understand what you say about this, like, voyeuristic. I had never put it like that, but it is kind of like that. And yeah, speaking about your body in such detail can be really exhausting emotionally and mentally. And it's like, I know you're kind of like me, you're like very willing to just be an open book and talk about things, and you do it because you have this, need to want to change and make a positive impact. But I think a lot of people just can really not take advantage of that, but they don't realize how big it is of you to do this. You see a video on TikTok of someone being so open, and they just don't realize that it takes a lot to talk about that.
We see it so much in the intersex community. Creators like us are talking about our bodies in ways that you would never see males or females do.
Yeah.
A man is never like, well, this is the size of the head of my penis, and that's what makes me an average dude. Like, no one ever does that. So it is a lot. But people Yeah, they like it and they're sort of blinded by their interest and sometimes don't see the work that goes into that.
Yeah. So have you actually, I wanted to ask, have, so you said you found your community on TikTok. Have you found anyone in the States and connected with them and potentially even like met up with them in the intersex community?
Yes, for the first time in my life, and I'm very proud of it. I'm a part of this organization called Queer Club Idaho,
Awesome.
and it's the first time that I've been around other intersex people, and it's so fun to talk about the different ways that we're intersex. And whenever we meet, we have a conversation just like the one you and I are having now. Like, what are your variations? Like, what was that like medically? And it's just like kind of this exciting sort of gossip vibe that you get from it because you're around someone that you can like actually just tell it all to, and they're
Mm,
not gonna be confused or shocked. And they don't need to know, but they want to know because
mm,
they want to know about you and be friends with you.
mm.
So that has been so brilliant. And then we put on, I'm part of the leadership team. So we put on events every single week. We do queer coffee, we do queer crafting. And the way that we're seeing queer people like come out of their houses and like have a place to go and find new friends, it is one of the best things in my life right now.
Oh, that's amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
so fulfilling. And that's great that you have something like that to be a part of. And yeah, it's nice that other people in the intersex community are getting involved in the queer community, because I know like sometimes the intersex community and the queer community like are not always related, but I know that the people who do identify with the queer community, yeah, they really go all in. And I think the queer community as well as the intersex community, like they they really benefit in like lifting each other up, and it's just like such a nice supportive environment to be involved in. So it's amazing that you have that, and very lucky that you get to be surrounded by like people that you can share your experiences with. So I'm really happy to hear that. Not everyone
Thank
does have
you.
that.
Oh, especially in Idaho, there are so many anti-trans bills. We don't legally recognize intersex people. There's general homophobia and religion. It's like a safe haven right now, and it's been really
Mm.
lovely.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my main well, it's basically all of my friends are in queer club right now. I've got a few
Mm.
like neighbors and things outside of that, but I'm rather new to this town, and that's really where I've seen myself blossom socially in addition to just finding people to relate to.
Awesome. Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
You were just mentioning that being able to share all of your stories and revealing that you are a very multifaceted person, that you're not just intersex, you are a person that has a life and multiple different stories to tell. How do you envision all of your different stories, intersex, winning the lottery, all of these other things that you want to share in these life lessons that you have and experiences? How do you envision converging them all together for a unified message to your audience?
Hmm. I think that it happens automatically, and I don't think it's any sort of a lesson. I think that it's a really good example of our hunger for honest connection with other human beings, connections
Mm,
that feel meaningful and are educational.
mm,
Because when people tell me stories from their lives, I I always feel grateful. It's this interesting mix of being intrigued but also excited to like know this individual more.
mm,
Also an additional excitement for being able to relate. And I think that just telling stories honestly and really intimately is giving people that sensation of connection that especially post COVID, so many of us are really hungry for. So I love
mm.
storytelling as a medium. I love just speaking whatever is on my mind. And I think the main message is just that we all need that sort of connection with others.
Nice. That's beautiful. And I think you're really, really talented at speaking. Like you're very eloquent and you're very good at storytelling. I know all your TikToks, I'm always really engaged in what you're saying. You just have a way of, I don't know, commanding your voice. um
I try. It's not always easy, but I try.
um So looking ahead, if you could paint a picture of the imprint that you want to leave um, in your efforts in the intersex community, what would that look like? What are you hoping to achieve?
I think that I would like to get to a point where there's less to be said because we've built it into the education system. I am really interested in moving forward and continuing in advocacy, but also maybe moving towards law specifically. I'm about to graduate this next semester, so I have a lot of options for law schools potentially as a postgraduate. And I'm very interested in just building in the legitimacy of intersex people in sex identification at birth, and then
Mm,
also keeping the education systems open and unbiased enough to provide like a true education on biology
mm,
and sex designation.
mm-hmm.
So I hope to see my advocacy move there. But if it doesn't, I'm sure that I will continue to speak about my own story online, and that will just be satisfying to me as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've got big dreams for this, but then also when I think about actually doing them, I get a little scared. There's a lot of violence and like
Mm,
disappointing legislation change where I don't know if it's possible yet to take my advocacy where I want it to go. But at least
mm-hmm.
for now, internet. Let's just do the internet, right?
Yeah. Yes. Do what you can with what you have available at your fingertips. And that's the beauty of the internet.
It
Yeah.
really is. I feel very safe in what I'm doing. I was cautious at first, but I feel so comfortable and good about the form of advocacy that I take part in. And if I can ever bring it into the world in a really very intact way, I want that to be through legislation.
Brilliant. So you're finishing up school soon and then you hope to go to law school. Is that your plan? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been looking into law schools. One thing is I'm not quite ready to leave my town and
Yeah.
my house. It's
Mm.
only been a year and a half that I've been living here.
Mm-hmm.
So while I definitely want to pursue law school, I would actually have to move. So it's a plan of mine, but it may take a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, that's exciting. And I hope that you get where you want to go and that you can take your mission exactly where you desire it to be. And yeah, best of luck in that endeavor.
Thank
Is
you.
there, to conclude our conversation, is there anything that you want to add in what you want to see for the future of intersex awareness and intersex in general?
Representation. That would be so fun if we had more intersex characters in TV, more songs about what it means to be intersex,
Yeah.
books. I'm so ready to see us all the time. I'm really lucky I've started to know intersex people like yourself, like online. You're one of my first intersex friends. And now I
Mm-hmm.
see a few in person. I want them now in fiction. I
Yeah.
want them in stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same. I'm just absolutely dying for some representation because it's just so long overdue. And when you really think about how minimal the representation is, it just seems ridiculous because it's something that it's as old as time itself. It's as old as humans is being intersex, and still people don't know about it. Still that there's just no representation. Like I spend my time writing emails to film companies and like TV shows and being like, this is why you need an intersex character. And I haven't heard back from any yet, but I'm gonna keep going until that happens.
It's an important thing to do. Did you end up watching everybody?
Yeah, I
Uh,
did. Yeah, it was awesome.
It was awesome, but it displays exactly kind of what I'm speaking of, where it focuses a lot on the basic information,
Mm,
what would be considered basic to us,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
medical information about what it means to be intersex and definitions and our experiences. And I just feel like we've been there for so long because not enough people
Yeah.
know. Like, I wish we already knew what it meant. I wish we already knew about the medical atrocities. I'm ready to move forward, but I can understand that it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, like I can't wait for intersex characters to be in shows where it doesn't really have to be about like informing everyone about intersex. It's just like there's just an intersex character in the show, and that's just, you know, part of them. That's just part of the character. We don't have to explore everything to do with intersex and introduce it to the world. It's just they're intersex, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure we can bring it about.
Yeah, we just have to keep making TikToks.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for having me. It's been really nice to talk to you. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure we'll meet in person one day. If you come to Melbourne or am I in the States, I'll definitely hit you up. And
as soon as I've got the money, I'll be there, and I will hit you up, of course.
Yay. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.